everyone. I'm Marin McKellen, and we in the Global Ed office thought it would be interesting to talk to some of our colleagues to get their perspectives on the pandemic and how it relates to their specific fields. So with me today is Chuck Steele, Manager of Student Life. Chuck, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for asking me to be on. I've been watching a lot of your videos and they're really great. It's a great series.
I appreciate that. We're quite proud. So Chuck, here we are at the beginning of fall semester and we're not seeing that normal mass of students wandering the halls, and I'm imagining that the new normal beginning of term activities look quite different in the Office of Student Life too. Can you tell me what student life is looking like right now during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, the biggest difference, I'd say you're right about the beginning looking different. We always look forward to new student orientation just because of the crush of energy with all the new students coming on campus, and we have all the presenters and all the orientation leaders. And it's just always has been a great way to start the year. And, honestly, we didn't really know what to expect this year with going to a virtual new student orientation. We weren't sure about the impact that would have, how it would be received by the students. Would we have the same energy? And I have to say, we were all, we learned a lot going through the process. I mean, that was a huge endeavor to move it online. But the good news is the energy was there. The energy that the presenters brought, that the orientation leaders brought, the new students were really engaged in the conversations that we were having, and they seemed really receptive. And, even I would say excited to start the new year, even with working remotely. So, it's going to be very different this year, but hopefully we're going to keep some of those threads, like the energy and the enthusiasm we'll be able to maintain from the pre-COVID days.
I think I was part of the new student orientation. I appreciate all the work you guys did with that. And I remember talking to you about the importance of community and how that hasn't diminished during these times. And different groups are dealing with it differently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say, talking about community building, one of the things we saw as we went remote in the spring was, how all the clubs reacted. And, we had for the first time, we had over 100 clubs, and we were very excited about it. And we were very excited about our end of the year celebration. And then, everything got kind of switched over in March. But what was exciting to see was, how some of the clubs, Stephanie Quirk in our office actually described it this way, but it's like a lot of the students felt like they were thrown overboard when we had to leave campus. Mm. And the students that were involved with clubs were able to circle up and lock arms and form that community. And so even if they stopped focusing on club events, which some of them did, they still had that sense of community, that bond with the other students in the clubs that helped them get through that semester, because that was a difficult time for everybody.
Yeah, and I remember you saying one of the groups that you mentioned was Student Leadership Council, and about how they, after that happened, that club in particular, or that organization, had a great summer, you said.
Yeah, and good catch. I appreciate the differentiating the clubs and the organizations. But we got caught up. We have a 2-tier process for installing new officers. And the move to being remote happened right in between. So we had the new student trustee was seated, the new Student Leadership Council president was seated, but we were not able to fill the other officer positions. So at the very beginning of the summer, we did fill student rep positions, and that team came together so quickly and bonded so quickly, all online. And we had one of the most productive summers that we've had with Student Leadership Council that I can recall. So, I like to think of being online as just one variable. There's still a whole host of other variables that impact the effectiveness of a group. So go ahead.
Do you know, I appreciate that, but do you know what about it made it successful? Have you reflected on that at all, or do you know anything, or is that just something that you noticed that they had a great summer? Do you know why?
You know what? We haven't really reflected on it yet. But if I had to say, I think it's, sometimes when you're pressed, you step up to the challenge. And I think the students, the ones especially that stepped up as the student representatives, they were for the most part, they were fairly new to the organization. And if you're the type of student who's going to step up during the time of pandemic and get involved with a new organization, you're probably going to rise to that challenge. And Samia Syed, the student trustee, and Alex, the SLC president, also stepped up to that challenge, because I think the same thing where they were the transition piece. And so the fact that they were able to welcome the new members and kind of get them acclimated and get things moving, I don't think it was easy by any means, but they really did a great job with it.
It's good to hear. Now, what about, and again, I don't want to name club names or anything like that, but, in terms of struggling, I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about why they succeeded. I wonder what about it was, why did they struggle? And I'm thinking, is it the unknown? Is it the numbers and, more people, more success? I don't know.
You're referring to the clubs in the spring?
Well, yeah, you talked about how some rose to the challenge, other clubs and organizations more struggled with moving online, just that transition.
Yeah, I mean, again, with 100 clubs, there's a lot of different stories and variables. And I think, the clubs that had kind of a firm structure in place that was able to be adapted, like say if they had a speaker series and the speakers would come in and speak to club members, that is something that was easily able to be adapted online. If you were doing social events, or if you were doing, mixer type things, well, that was a little bit more difficult. Some clubs just get together and have some more informal club meetings where they're more discussion based. And again, that can transfer online. And then the other thing is, all the students, I think, really experienced the beginning of the pandemic differently. And so I know for a lot of students, the stress of just moving to online classes, of having to take their classes, was a big change for them and something that they had to deal with and take time. And then other people had family responsibilities that changed drastically, that they had to, give those time. So there's so many stories that kind of go into the success of a club. But overall, I thought they really did a good job. And like I said, even if they couldn't do the work of the club specifically, I feel that, just from hearing from students, they were able to use the bonds and the friendships that they formed as part of the clubs to help get them through the difficult time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which again is, honestly, that's such a strength of community. And so, it's one of those things, like, you build community, not always knowing when you're going to use it or when it's going to come into play. But in this case, we saw it, play out in real time.
And the time people take to adapt to something, right? Some people are quicker, some people, need to think about it for a little bit.
Right.
So we're several months into being at home, and I'm wondering what student life is doing to engage students. We got our new crop of students yesterday, so College of DuPage looks very different to them than College of DuPage looked to students last year who were new. So I'm wondering, what have you done in student life to engage students differently this year?
Well, we'll find out. Normally we kind of, in terms of events, we kind of ramp that down during the summertime. A lot of the work and the preparation is going into new student orientation. But this summer we did do what I would call we did do more programming than we normally do, some online events. And that was really to kind of test the waters, to see what our capabilities were, what the students seemed to be enjoying. And so we've built out some activities for the fall based on what we learned over the summer. But then the other big piece is, a big part of our job is to be responsive to the students. So, we have a framework of some events that we're going to be doing throughout the year. We've adapted Chap Days, we've adapted the Student Life Fair, Clubapalooza we're going to have. But we also have to leave room for responding to what the students need. And, honestly, I feel that like this semester, there's still going to be a lot of changes that are happening. I don't feel that we have, or that the students really have that firm a footing. I just think there's a lot of moving pieces right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, on the college side, but, in their lives. And so we just have to be responsive to that.
Yeah. Tell me, I know one of the things we talked about, I don't know if you did it yet, if you're going to do it, an escape room. I kind of want to know how an escape room works in a virtual format.
We're going to find out during Chap Days. That's one of those things where we haven't done, but, one of the things we did over the summer too, is we talked to a lot of our colleagues. We're all on listservs with each other, and we all have been kind of experimenting together. And the virtual escape rooms is something that we've heard from a few different schools that the students really liked and seemed to be pretty popular. So I will get back to you after we have ours and let you know how.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one. We talked a little bit about COVID-19 providing an opportunity to do things that we've always wanted to do but never got around to doing. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those things are for you? You just kind of mentioned, because we've talked, our offices work a lot together, and we talked about coordinating events and things like that. I'm wondering what you have to say about what is that looking like now?
Well, I think in terms of events, we've in student life, we've always tried to help promote all the campus events so that the students know about all the opportunities, not just the student life events. But I think, one of the things we thought about at the beginning of the summer was the need of, trying to coordinate a little bit more with all the other offices and committees that are doing events. And, we've always, I think, have had a very collaborative spirit at College of DuPage. But I just think there's opportunity for more. And so trying to put together some meetings so that everyone is doing events, again, looking for collaboration opportunities, but also then looking at scheduling so that we're not overloading the event schedule, so that we are spacing things out so students can participate in as much as possible. But the other thing that we're doing is that, that we've talked about doing for quite a while was just getting more of our workshops and trainings online. And so, for our Living Leadership program, Stephanie Quirk has spent a lot of time over the summer putting some of those workshops into Blackboard. We're putting some of our club officer and our advisor trainings online. And, one of the reasons we wanted to do it was, basically is to expand our reach. We don't want people would tell us, I can't make this workshop. I can't, I'm not able to make this time and place. And so by putting them online, it makes it a lot easier for more students or advisors to participate in this type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and it's a good segue to the next question I have for you, and that's, so when we received the great news that we can all go back to campus, what have you started during the time that we've been off campus that you actually see yourself doing more of when we get back to campus?
I think, again, we're really expanding our presence. Where we wanted some of these things that we have in terms of the Living Leadership program and the EDGE program, we really want to scale up. And I think by being able to do this and really taking the time to learn how to do it right and get to be experts in this area, we hadn't been able to do that prior. So now when we go back, it's going to be the best of both worlds. We're going to have our in-person activities, and we're going to have an online presence. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's going to, even when we go back, I think it's still going to take a long time for everything to readjust. People are going to be recovering in many ways. So I think their time and, is going to be very valuable. So being able to, some students who are going to be on campus and want to participate in person, we're going to be there for them. But the students who maybe are working or have family responsibilities who can't make that are going to be able to participate in a different way. And so I do see when we get back that our reach is just going to be even greater.
Yeah, there's several things that we've done through spring and summer. We're in the business of sending students around the world, and that was cut off. And we have definitely attacked things that that have been important, but we've never gotten around to. So I totally understand where you're coming from with that, because that stuff will continue when we get back on campus too. And we've talked about it before, that outside the comfort zone is the learning zone. And I feel like students, that's not only just for students, but for us too, is just that whole initial fear of, oh my God, what does remote working look like? And then, coming to terms with it and learning from it. And
I honestly, I think, field studies and student life overlap a lot in that area of experiential education. And so I think even within our office, not just for the students, but for the staff as well, we do try to look at experiences as learning opportunities. And so, it really does help. It helps you cope with the stress of a new environment when you realize that, there is a good to be gained from going through this experience. And when you think about it, just like you said, it's not just getting out of the comfort zone. Everybody, I find that most people are familiar with that phrase, but they're not familiar with the idea that outside of that comfort zone is the learning zone.
Right.
And so if you just think about it as getting outside your comfort zone, that can be daunting. But if you think of it as getting inside your learning zone, all of a sudden you can have an appreciation for being there. And so I think that type of attitude has really helped us within our office. And then I think it also helps when we kind of extend that attitude to the students and help them realize that, just because you face challenges in and of themselves are not bad, but you want to learn from them. And I think that the biggest piece there is, as an educator, is we're always, what we do for ourselves and what we're telling the students is you have to reflect on the part
Right. And it's a
you
huge
know,
part
that's
of it.
that final
It's a huge part of
piece.
experiential.
Yeah, that's that final piece that I think gets overlooked most of the time. And without it, you can't really call it experiential education. It's just an experience.
Exactly. I know you and I both have a very strong Clifton Strengths background, and I have gone through the last several months, especially thinking about strengths from a student's perspective in terms of what can, and what you and I in our areas can do, when we get back, to help students process this. From a student development standpoint, I don't want to get into it too much because I know people watching may not know about it, but we all have our strengths, right? And so how did our strengths come out during this time? Because, I know I've talked to you about it. I've got high adaptability, and I definitely saw that come out. And, just talking to students about what they noticed, even if they aren't familiar with strengths vocabulary, but what did you notice about yourself during that? Well, I really, I felt bad for everybody else going through things, and that speaks to empathy. And, so just the conversation that we might have when we get back about processing the pandemic.
And that's a perfect example of kind of directing that reflection piece, and I will say one of the things that I love about teaching strengths and teaching leadership and even teaching communication these are all things that, just impact your life daily. Really, every moment of every day, you can use leadership, communication, and strengths. And so, yes, especially when you're up in a challenge, the whole idea with strengths that I really appreciate is that the task doesn't change. You have to go through the pandemic. I have to go through the pandemic. But how we're doing it and how we're relying on our strengths is going to be different. But we're both going to do it from a place of our best selves, right? And that's what's going to make us get through it. And then there's also an appreciation of, let's do this together. Mm-hmm. Like, so, because you and I are friends, I can connect with you and, kind of learn from your adaptability. and that helps me. And so I just think there's so much to gain from that type of attitude and learning about your own personal strengths.
There is, and I think again, if you're kind of, we talked earlier on in this chat about, the clubs that stood up and immediately transitioned, and what about it? And that's what was going through my mind at that point, is I'm wondering what strengths those leaders have, those student leaders have that they tapped into to get them through it. And somebody who needs to reflect a little bit, and those might be the more deliberative, analytical people, where they're more silent in their, in the way they process information, and they need to kind of, just sit with it for a while, and they don't transition that quickly, and here's why. And to not make people feel, ashamed of how they processed it. So I know that's a conversation that I want to have, because I think that that's how you can, it gives you a new way to talk about yourself, right? Because the pandemic is the pandemic, but there are other life events that are going to happen that the same kind of processing is going to happen.
Right. And I think for students who haven't taken their strengths assessment or haven't learned about it yet, it's such a good introduction to it, because what you do find when you're pressed, you do go to your natural state and you rely on your natural abilities. And so being able to identify those raw talents that haven't been developed into strengths yet, helping them learn about them and creating them so that they're actual real tools that they can use intentionally, and not just, again, a raw talent, I think is a great introduction to the whole idea.
We should hold that for another conversation, right? I mean,
Bring me back for another chat.
You want to be the first 2 times? Oh, no, we did a pandemic. We had the nurses and the healthcare professionals on again because COVID.
Yeah, okay. I'll give them that.
I would love to talk more about that, because I don't know. That's the part I'm missing now is, I learned so much from students, and I learn a lot from their energy at the beginning of the term, and I get inspired by that, and I'm reminded of why, I've spent so many years doing what I do. So yeah, those conversations with students are something I'm looking forward to. So
well, and can I tell you, speaking of conversations, one of the things that I appreciate about these global chats is it just reminds me of the times you'd stop by my office or I'd stop by your office. And so we're not having that as much right now. And so this is just, it is nice to kind of have a public chat about things that are happening at work, and just sharing perspectives, really.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I will, they don't have to be recorded, but I will definitely, want to do that some more.
All right.
So winding down, Chuck, is there anything that you wished I would have asked you that I didn't, or something else? You're such a witty, creative, knowledgeable person. You've got to leave us with something. No pressure.
I was just going to say, the only thing I would say is I think that I've heard many people say this right now, and that is the idea of just, we're all going through this pandemic together, but it's affecting us all differently, and it's affecting us at different times, and it just is kind of always hanging there in the background. And so I think I think Jason Snart said this in a video, but the idea that as we're dealing with colleagues and as we're dealing with students is just to remember to show grace, show patience, understand that, again, we don't know what everyone else is going through, their individual struggles. So I just think kind of keeping that in the forefront of our minds as we, go through this semester is going to do a lot of good. And I have to say, honestly, my experience has been that is what most people are doing, but I think it's always good to just say it again.
I agree. And you did not disappoint.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate the time you took to talk with me today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Great fall semester.
All right. Thanks.